How can an organization measure this profit versus purpose equation to know whether or not it should stay on course or start doing things differently?
Well, I think it is actually to revolutionize measurement, because we've actually never not used the word CSR in this entire interview, which is what people typically think about as purpose, but I think it's misleading. So CSR is often the harm that you do, say your carbon emissions and your water usage. And even companies which are taking purpose seriously, they're trying to measure stuff, but they're typically measuring CSR. So how much bad do you do? Are you trying to do less evil? Well, actually, I think purpose is about actively doing good. So what problem you're trying to solve. So as another practical example, take Vodafone. So in 2012, they did a great thing, which was they were very transparent about their taxes. They produced the world's first tax transparency report in the telecoms industry, showing that they were paying, I believe it was £12 billion of tax. But that's CSR, right? That's showing how much harm they were doing, perhaps by avoiding tax. Instead, I think what was more about purpose was Vodafone in 2007 launching M-Pesa, which was a mobile money service in Kenya, which provided financial inclusion to the unbanked, and that lifted 200,000 households out of poverty, the majority of whom were women. And so I think companies need to move away from just trying to report the harm that they do. That's still important. What we do care about carbon emissions and climate change and fair tax, but try to think about measures of how much good they're actively creating, and that could indeed be the number of people that we've provided financial inclusion to. And I think that revolution in the data and the measurement is one of the key areas of responsible business going forward.
Okay, so if I'm a CEO and I'm reading your book here, this fine book that you've written, what should I be thinking? What should I be doing? Because if I look at certain industries, I know that they have no desire to listen to what you've got to say because they're doing quite well. Pharmaceutical, we talked about Merck earlier. Okay, let's come back to pharmaceutical. Reputationally, it's not good, right? People think of them as medicine should be, for accessible to all of us, and I think some countries, the UK being one of them, Canada, Australia, etc., would back that up. But there are many, many places where these pharmaceutical companies are hiking prices up because they can. No one's stopping them. It's going unchecked. We, us everyday guys, are sort of seeing these companies with a huge disregard and disdain for any of these kind of rather, good and well-meaning and well-intentioned statements that you're making. Could you ever persuade a company like that to start thinking differently?
I think you can, and I think the first way to start is to say, well, actually, purpose need not be at the expense of profit. So pharmaceutical companies do need to make money, and they need to charge actually high prices for drugs that are successful. Why? Because 90% plus of new drugs, they fail. Well, and we couldn't have the innovation on these new drugs if we didn't allow pharmaceuticals companies to make money on their existing drugs. So there's nothing evil about making money, but there is sort of a limit when you think about, well, am I charging high prices here because I can completely get away with it because I've got a local monopoly? Or is it because, well, I think I'm getting a fair return on all the R&D that I've done? And I can't tell you what is the fair price, just like I can't tell anybody what is the fair amount to give to charity, right? There's no sort of clear formula for that, but there's certainly the thought process. Is the way that I'm creating money for my shareholders because I am growing the pie, creating drugs which people are willing to pay a lot for because they are actually having a big benefit? Or is it through exploiting people? And one other example I use in my book is the example of Turing Pharmaceuticals, this famously unpopular guy, Martin Shkreli in the US, who bought existing drugs and hiked the prices. So that was clearly pie splitting. He was not innovating. He was just changing what was already there. But if instead companies do innovate, they spend a lot of money, and then they choose to charge high prices to recoup that innovation and to fund some other innovation that I don't think is immoral. That's just part of the research process. Research is expensive, and we need profits in order to pay for that. And if you look at, say, the statements by CEO of Merck, Kenneth Frazier, he's got a great Harvard interview, right there, you do see that actually a pharmaceutical CEO does think that purpose matters and is not just making nice statements for an interview, but there's many things that they're doing to try to put this into practice.
Okay, so you mentioned earlier about the behavior of some of the funds. They're moving into literally greener pastures. CSG is important. Some of our audience invest in mining, and that has been a seismic shift, pardon the pun, to make sure that it's a very important part of what the company does, because example, COVID affects different people in different ways, but various studies have shown that First Nations in Canada, or even down in the US, are more susceptible for a variety of reasons, and companies shut down very, very quickly in those cases to make sure that not only their workers but the society around them were not endangered by decisions made by miners looking for profit. So I think that's an example of the way that attitudes have changed, certainly in mining, for instance, over the last few years. But also funds, people like BlackRock, they're not investing in coal or dirty coal specifically, because there are different types of coal. They are being influenced by their shareholders, obviously, and their behaviors are changing in terms of what they will and won't invest in. But that's up at that level. Again, the average guy can't sort of understand or countenance, those sorts of decisions. But so what can we do on an everyday level? Can we affect change?